Just a few seconds of your time. I want to give you a life update. I'm officially a father. Little Clive was born May 29th, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Mom and baby are doing fantastic. I haven't been sleeping a lot. That's why the content has been a little bit slower in the last week or so, but I should start getting back in the groove of things here in the next week or so. So we'll start with this video and we'll be back next week as well with the shareholder coverage for Tesla. They're meeting on Thursday of next week, June 13th. Enjoy the podcast. Okay, so Alexandra Mertz has been working very diligently for the last few years, it seems, but it's really in the last few weeks and months. There's a very important shareholder vote coming up for Tesla on June 13th, and Alexandra Mertz has done a ton of work to sort of rally the retail investor base for the company. Now, maybe in a couple minutes, Alexandra, if you don't mind, give us a little bit of a sort of foundation of what's happening with the story. What's the kind of work you're doing to sort of get more attention on this thing? And then we're going to go really deep on this, not just about how to vote for the company or your shares for the vote that's coming up here in about a week, but also all the different dynamics that are going on. So I'll give the floor to Alexandra with her awesome glasses. Go for it.
And did you see that hat that I got in Austria? Did you see?
Oh, beautiful. Look at that.
Yeah.
Ooh, stylish.
Thank you.
Always bringing the swag.
So, there you go. So on June 13th is a regular annual shareholder meeting. Let me just frame that together, because it was supposed to be in May. It got delayed by a couple of weeks because Tesla wanted to include a couple of things first. In February, there was a Delaware court making a preliminary decision which would resigned the options, the compensation package that Elon had since 2018. And Tesla decided it was important enough to re-vote on that, also because we had done then with Amy _SF Tao, she's brilliant, a survey on investors of Tesla who wanted to re-vote on the 2018 compensation package. So that was one of the big things that they wanted to include in this annual shareholder vote. They did, and that's why it became delayed from May to June, because the whole setup had to be structured. The second setup that needed to be structured is immediately following that judgment in Delaware, Elon tweeted out that that's it. He wanted to leave Delaware and redomesticate the company to Tesla, but not so quick. He's only the CEO and a board member. He can't decide that by himself. So the board had to diligently build up the argument whether it was really a wise decision to go from Delaware to Texas. And they did so by forming a special committee that was only dedicated to that question, and that needed time. So that was the second reason this got delayed. Long story short, end of April came what is called a proxy. The proxy is all the material that is given to shareholders so that they can vote on 12 items. On these 12 items will be voted on during all this time since end of April up to June 12th for most of the people. Some international holders will be shorter, and then we will know those results during the shareholder meeting on June 13th, and we'll know the details of each vote in a SEC filing 3-4 days later. So that is the frame, and then the complications began. Go ahead, Farzad, or Hans, ask me any questions.
So complications, right? So talk about a little bit some of the highest level complications that you're facing, and I think a lot of this is around some brokers that are out there that are just not allowing for retail investors to vote, and then this is going to turn into a crazy conversation. So maybe start there and we'll go from there.
I mean, this is going to be a lot of legalese, and I hope, this is not boring, because I think it's actually very exciting if you see what's happening and how retail shareholders can make the real difference. Now, the first thing you should know is the shareholder base of Tesla is about 14% insiders, most of it obviously Elon with 13%, and then Kimball and some other either past executive or current executives. So 14. And then you have the retail shareholders with about 42%. So we're now at 56. And they have another 44%, which is more or less evenly split between passive funds, meaning index funds, the Vanguards, the BlackRocks of this world, who don't want to be in Tesla, but have to be in Tesla because it's part of the S&P 500 or whatever else index they're replicating. And so these funds usually love having their voting power because they don't do those index funds just for the sake of index funds. They don't bring a lot of money, except that's obviously in huge volumes, but they give you a lot of political power because you can vote with these for these companies' shareholder meetings. It's exactly what's happening now. And then you have the active investors like the Baron funds, like ARK and some others who are actively investing in Tesla, some pension funds as well, and so on. So it's a very unusual composition of the shareholder base. And some of the items that are up for vote cannot be voted by Elon and Kimball. So if you take those 14% off, it gives those 44% of retail investors an even higher leverage. Actually, I calculated it for different calculations, but about 47.5% of voting power we have as retail investors, while all these other institutional investors have about 52.5%. That is huge. I mean, you have to know that, for example, for GM, 90% are institutional investors, right? And this is by far of the mega caps, the highest portion of retail investors. And so by having such a retail investor base, it is actually complicated for a company to rally and understand who is going to vote, because lots of people don't even know how to vote. They've never been bothered. They've got Tesla stock and forget about it. They're all over the world. This is one of the stocks that there's a huge Korean base, a huge Japanese base. So, retail investors that you are hardly hearing about other than in their respective countries. And then, so you don't know about their issues of being able to vote. So we slid into this meeting. Like I said, it was funny because we were all waiting for this proxy to come to see whether the shareholders would be able to vote on the 2018 comp package, what would happen with Texas, whether this was in this vote, next vote, because they can call for a second or third shareholder meeting this year, given how many issues are at stake. So finally it came. And then very quickly, the US banks, I think actually the first one was Robinhood, allowed voting. So you have to know that in the US, there are a couple of providers who allow proxy votes. So the company, in this case Tesla, decides who is their proxy vote collector. I think that's the best word to use. And they went with Broadridge, and their platform is called proxyvote.com. Couldn't be easier, right? So that's the one they used. And that means that any bank or broker that was linked to Broadridge's proxy vote could just plug it in, and then you had Farzad's 15,000 shares, I don't know how many you have, showing up on proxy vote. And
15 trillion.
Oh, excuse me. And then you could just log in and do that. Or some of them had actually automated the system. You had the feeling that you were still on Robinhood voting, but actually it was the embedded version of proxy vote. Anyway, so for lots of US-based and Canadian-based platforms, brokers or banks, it was very easy because they were used to that. And then very quickly people reached out to me saying, oh, but I'm sitting in Germany and I can't vote with Comdirect, or I'm sitting in England, or I'm sitting in Norway or whatever, I can't do that, or Korea or Japan. And so I heard all these people and thought, what now? What can I do? And then we had Elon saying, oh, people should be able to vote. Tell me if you can't vote. But it just always got very messy because, thousands of people responded, but nobody really had an idea who had a lot of shares. Was it really a technical problem? Did they just not know how to contact their banks? Were they missing an email from their bank? Didn't they see it on the app? So it was always also a question of, was the user knowledgeable enough to know what to do? So at one moment I just had it because it was just overwhelming. So I set up a SurveyMonkey survey saying, okay, anybody that can't vote, fill out these 10 questions. What country do you live? Who is your broker? How do you interact with them? How many shares do you have? Do you want to change of broker? Just the basic questions. And launched that on a Saturday morning. I think it was a Saturday morning, middle of May. And Elon reposted it and pinned it. And that obviously helped. So it got 10 million views. And when it had the first 1,500 respondents, in the end, it had 3,366, if I remember right. But when it had 1,500, all this happened the next day. I was flying to Europe. So it was just to say I was trying and doing what I could, but it was such a mess. But anyway, so when I had the first 1,500, I started analyzing it, and it became very clear that about 20% were with a bank in England. so lots of them, and about 40% were with 3 or 4 brokers in Norway. So there were clusters, big clusters of problems, and then lots of smaller ones. And so I published on that Sunday an article after the first 1,500, and that got reposted by Elon and pinned for more than 24 hours, and that got 43 million views. So that's when the whole thing started rolling, because that's when suddenly everybody understood this was an issue. And this could actually become an issue, also a legal issue for the banks, because fair enough, they have their banking agreement with you where they say they can't make you vote because you're sitting in Germany and they're only doing this for German votes or whatever. But the thing is, the world has moved on, right? We're not in the Middle Ages anymore where you're just buying shares of the country you live in. You want to be an international player. And so this happened on Saturday, Sunday, and on Monday, the first Swedish bank, Avanza, cracked and said, we do it. Even if we have to do it manually, we're going to do it now. And so this flashed out a whole of Scandinavian Tesla shareholders who suddenly could vote. And then Nordnet, the biggest of the brokers that has Tesla shareholders, accepted it the same day or next day. It came very quickly afterwards. And that started a whole avalanche of people that suddenly could do it, which just shows you how fake these old excuses were for a long time, right? Because everybody was like, no, it's my custodian and I'm with Crest and I'm this and this. They had always the same stupid excuses. But then suddenly when the first one made it possible, you realize that there were ways. There may have not been easy ways. It may have not been as automated as they wanted to. And then people also realized there are a couple of votes you will never be able to vote. And that was a learning curve for a lot of people as well. For example, if you have a margin account and you use your margin, you're actually lending your stock. And so you can't vote on it anymore. That's the broker that has the right. So lots of people were like, oh, but I have an account. Yeah, it's a margin account and you are playing with your margin, so it's gone. And you may actually be playing only with a fraction of your margin, but everything is gone because it's all given as a guarantee. So that was the first learning curve for a lot of people. The second, a big one, and Farzad, you remember we talked about this 2 or 3 years ago, were mutual funds and ETFs. You invest in a Vanguard ETF, you invest in a mutual fund, they're gone. The fund manager has it now. So that took a while. And I mean, there are a couple of exceptions just to also call the good guys. State Street is allowing for 80% of their equity index funds that you recuperate the vote, but you have to actively contact them and say, cuckoo, I have my money in your State Street equity fund. I want to my part of the Tesla shares to vote on, and then you can do that. Vanguard does that for 5 funds. I've published them a couple of times, but none of the others. Fidelity doesn't do it. BlackRock doesn't do it. So, it's a little bit moving. This moved actually during the ESG time. So there's one silver lining of this ESG movement, but you realize that, shareholders have to do much more. These passive index funds have much too much power. We'll talk about that in a couple of months when this whole thing settles, but we should do things. There are things we have to also do to improve this whole field. So anyway, and then the other thing was that lots of banks and brokers actually use retail shares to shorten the stock, to gamble with the stock and whatever, and then they're gone. So there are so many forces happening around this stock, especially for a stock with so much interest like Tesla. So once the dam broke, we kept on explaining to everybody, you can vote now, contact them. Some needed emails, some had it on their platforms, some brokers reached out to their investors. So it became the hashtag voted Tesla24 became a platform of people exchanging information, how they could suddenly vote with this broker or that broker in that country. So there are now thousands and thousands of voted Tesla24 posts out there explaining all that. But they kept about, I would say, so how many could finally vote? It could be anywhere between 5 and 10% of outstanding shares that could finally vote. Okay, so there's just a huge amount. But there are about 3% of outstanding shares that can still not vote. Why do we know that? Because Robin Denholm gave interviews to the Financial Times, and Financial Times has released another article this weekend that I don't know whether Robin gave those numbers because they said that it was, undisclosed sources, but it was very clear that they were very well informed how much it is. So about 3% of people can still not vote. So what happened and we're a week away, right? We're a week away for people who can easily vote in the US and Canada. And we're for some international brokerages a day ahead of closing, right? Because they have then to submit this stuff. So Tesla has recruited now for weeks an advisory firm called Innisfree. They started contacting big US people that had lots of Tesla shares but had not voted yet. I have no idea how they get that information. But anyway, so they knew that. They helped them vote. So there was an active, they said about 100 people are working on this currently for Tesla at Innisfree. And then today suddenly was the surprisingly good news that Innisfree's UK operation, which is called Lake Isle in London, is now accepting that they play intermediary, meaning if you get from your UK broker with whom you couldn't vote yet a statement saying you held on the 15th of April, which was the date of record, so and so many shares, on a certain paper, letterhead, whatever it has to be, send it back to Lake Isle. Lake Isle then sends you the proxy list. You vote for the 12 items, send it back for them, and they record it. They record your vote. So this suddenly opened up this morning, and that should help at least UK-based people who couldn't vote so far. Mainly for HL Invest, which was the hugest one. That was the 18% in the initial survey. But I think there will be more. And I just reached out to them, Lake Isle in London, and said, look, I have more people. I mean, I have nothing. But we have more people in Scandinavia, but most of all, Germany and Austria. Flatex in Austria is also a big broker who still doesn't do anything. Can we send all those letters to you as well? Because their only subsidiary of Innisfree, other than outside of the US, is in London. So can she do that as well? This lady that does this now for them. I mean, she will be busy the next 24 hours, I tell you that. And her deadline is June 6th, in 2 days. So people have to get organized to get that statement from their bank, get it to her, and she then gets the proxy votes. She then gets the proxy votes to them. So I have my kids here for vacation. So you have everybody in the background. It's all good.
I love it. I love the wave, waving back. Okay. That was absolutely wonderful. And by the way, and let me throw this out there. Alexandra is does this for free. This is
sure.
on her time. You know, and this is what's crazy about the Tesla sort of retail investing community is that there's this force, you know, which explains what was it, 43% of the float is retail again. Yeah. What was it? Yeah. Was no 43. You have this force of like people that are all over the world that come together in times of like need or crisis, whatever you want to call this, and they're willing to just put their time forward. And this is why this story is so fascinating. Okay, so 5 to 10% of the float can now vote that couldn't before, which represents up to a fourth-ish, like 20 to 25% of the total retail investing base that was not able to vote on matters, and now they can. So that to me seems like a gigantic shift in how much influence the retail investing community can have, which is shocking. How big of a deal, how big of a difference is this going to make in your estimation?
Now, let me clear up. If these votes don't pass, it's not a catastrophe. I just want to make sure, because there are a couple of people walking around as if this is the end of Tesla if this doesn't pass. This is not true. I personally think the compensation is going to pass easily. The Texas vote, Texas redomestication is more complicated. We'll get to that in a second. But just let's make it very clear, if this doesn't pass, the sun will rise as well the next day. There's no issue about that. There is a plan B, there's a plan C, and there's a plan D. Now, plan A would make everything easy. The fact that this would pass, both would pass now, makes things easier. Easy is never easy with Tesla, but it would make things easier. Why? If the compensation package passes now with a good majority, it gives us two major advantages. The current Delaware case is not finished yet, but if a large majority votes again for the compensation package, it makes it clear that there's actually no damage. The current plaintiff's attorney who currently won, says that, well, I'm saving 40, 50, 60 billion for Tesla because they don't have to pay Elon. That's not how it works. It's an issuance of options, but let's just pretend it is. Under Delaware, there's a Delaware precedent. It's called Sugarcoat, if I remember right. A plaintiff's attorney who saves money for the shareholders is entitled to up to 30% of what he makes the company save, right? So 30% of that would be much more than the 6 billion they're asking, because they're now pretending they're reasonable. We're so reasonable, we're only asking for 6 billion. Now, if this repasses, and we're currently in that state. We're in the state that the judge said, okay, it has to be resigned because there are so many, or there are formal errors in there, which have been corrected with the current proxy, because everything she claimed was wrong has now been added, and her judgment, her preliminary judgment, to the current proxy. So the revote cannot, you cannot say anything is missing anymore because everything is in there. So if we revote for it and it passes, while we're still in negotiation about the plaintiff's attorney's fees, an argument that could be made by Tesla's lawyers is, look, you're pretending that there are 40, 50, 60 billion saved, and you should get your cut of that. Well, we just had a new shareholder meeting. It's not saved. It was in limbo somewhere here, but now it's gone. So the money is going to be spent again. So you didn't save the company anything. So your cut of nothing is nothing, right? I'm sure that's what they're trying to do. So that's on the current procedure. Then this judgment, whatever will come out of it, will go into appeal. Okay, because Tesla has already announced they're going to go into appeal. They can go into appeal only 30 days after the judgment is finally rendered. That's supposed to be beginning of July. So by that time, we'll have obviously the count on the compensation package. So it will be another strong argument for the appeal. And the third point why it's great to have this is because then you can get it ratified. So let me just explain. It's not because this compensation package may be revoted positively with a majority or large majority that it becomes automatically the new situation. It has to go back in another procedure, in a new procedure, to Delaware, certainly to the same judge. She seems to love to interact with Elon in a procedure that's called 204. If there's any objection, it's called 205, where she has to re-ratify it. But if the majority who has re-voted on it is clear and substantial, I don't see how she can go around ratifying it. So all that to say, the compensation package, Plan A, if it passes, it's not a straight win, but it is a major additional evidence for three other elements, and that's good, and all three could actually turn out well. The Texas redomestication is, for me, a much bigger issue, and in Plan A, it should pass, just because it's Plan A, but it is very unlikely to pass. The Texas redomestication, for it to pass, has to fulfill two conditions. There are two different conditions that have to both add up. The first one is 50% of all outstanding shares have to vote for it. And the second one is 50% of the casted votes have to be for it. In the first case, 50% of outstanding votes, Elon and Kimball can vote. So we already have 13, 14% of them. But obviously there it is even more important that all retail investors voted, because to get to 50% and to 50% being yes is a very, very steep hill. And the second one of the casted votes, Kimball and Elon cannot vote, but I think we'll get there. Why is that? Because everybody comes to me and says that is the most stupid role. Why did Tesla choose to make the conditions so high, so difficult to attain? Well, it wasn't Tesla's choice. This is all based on a precedent from a couple of months ago of TripAdvisor. TripAdvisor also wants to leave Delaware. I mean, everybody seems to want to leave Delaware, right? And so when TripAdvisor wanted to leave Delaware, if I'm rightly informed, I'm not a really specialist of that case, but let me sum up what I think. And probably Richard is a good person. You want to dig into this if you want to go further there. But anyway, TripAdvisor wanted to leave, but the owner of TripAdvisor still has more than 50%. So he voted in the old thing, casted vote 50%, and had that. But then he had one of the shareholders introducing a case in Delaware saying that doesn't vote because you yourself have 50%, so you're actually playing king here. And that had the same procedure in Delaware. And that judge ruled that you now have to have two conditions. So a dominant founder cannot just decide by himself playing king, meaning it has to be 50% of the outstanding votes and not only 50% of the casted votes. So all that to say, we have this TripAdvisor precedent that made a judgment that became law. just because it's precedent law there, which now is the underlying condition for our moving out of Delaware for Tesla, and that's why it's so important. So Plan A both passed, wonderful, we're there, and then once we're in Texas, we can issue voting right shares for Elon. We can start a new compensation package for the next period, whatever. None of that will happen if we're not in Texas. My probability for Plan A is the compensation will pass and Texas will not pass. Probably because we don't get to the quorum, to the right, to enough votes outstanding, but we'll see. Plan B would be, most probable for me, compensation package passes, but not Texas. Well, then they will redo the Texas vote in 6 months, and that will give us enough time to work with all those brokers and inform everybody to either move their shares to another broker or whatever, so that we're in a better position by then and probably the stock may fall a little bit, so people may actually buy, even more retail investors may buy, so we'll see. I also want to work with a lot of people on how they can secure that they don't have them in margin accounts without realizing, or that they block their stock from being able to be used. If you put stop losses at high levels, you actually block those stock and people and banks can't use it. So there are lots of things that we should all work on between this vote and maybe a future vote. Plan C would be compensation package doesn't pass and Texas doesn't pass. Well, that's a very unhappy situation, but I think then Elon will just have to write that compensation package off and concentrate on moving to, they will still do an appeal. Who knows, maybe we'll win the appeal, but if the chances of winning the appeal, if the shareholders now don't vote for it, are going down dramatically. There is no doubt for me that appeal is very unlikely to succeed then. And so that, would be the most unhappy situation, but it's not the end of things, because then they will concentrate on redomesticating to Texas. Again, that is much more important and can be voted on as many times as is needed. We just need to prepare now much better our retail base and make sure they can all vote. That's the crucial element that was, a bit hastily done this time.
So one of the questions I have is, and this is sort of one of my fears, and maybe help me walk through this. So, and I view a no vote on his compensation package. So this is a compensation package that was brought forward in 2018 that had different tranches that had to be hit from a P&L perspective, so profit and loss perspective, and then also from a market cap perspective for the stock. And then all of those were hit in subsequent years, which opened up this $55 billion compensation package in form of options or whatever, the complications there. But essentially, targets were hit, and then it was approved in 2018. Okay, and then a judge said no. So help me understand how a no vote on the compensation package. Let's say Plan C comes to fruition, and investors do end up voting no on a plan that was already passed in 2018. How would that not create a situation where Elon says this? Why should I work for a company where in the investor base approves it one day, but then disapproves it the other day, and I basically work for free for 6 days? Walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah, that would be the human thing to do, right? Something like that would happen to me. An employer, I'm self-employed, but an employer would suddenly, tell me that the bonus that was promised is not coming, or the salary that was, the deal that we'd reached is now, I've done my part and they're not doing theirs. The initial reaction would be stuff it and let me go, right? That's it. I don't think for Elon it's a good option, and I don't think he wants to do that. The issue is, if he leaves, so what? He still has 13% of Tesla. It's still his baby. I understand that, there may be other shiny companies out there that he likes to work on, but he is, without any doubt, the outstanding entrepreneur who made Tesla what Tesla is, and he doesn't want to see that go. And one of the arguments actually Tesla Q brings up, and they're exaggerating the impact, but some of his Tesla shares are pledged. Remember when he did the Twitter deal, the Twitter purchase, he needed to take out loans. So there's also financial incentive for him to not just let go, let the stock crash, because then he's the biggest loser in that game. So I don't think that that's going to happen. But I think he has to have good counsel explaining to him that the important part is moving to Texas and then restarting a compensation package and restarting voting rights. I don't think for Elon this was ever about money. I think this was on impact of his person on Tesla and all his other companies, but also on humanity and the world. So he wouldn't have that impact if he would just, leave and let it go. So for me, that's just not a scenario that's even an option. And if you read the proxy carefully and you see how they are preparing for the Texas redomestication, because there are like chapters and chapters and chapters on it, it is clear that they've really thought it through how to make his position comfortable there. And that's why I just want to make so sure if Texas doesn't pass this time, there is no limit on the revotes we can do to get this passed. There's a lot of homework to be done to have better voting conditions, but we will get to Texas. And once we are there, he will have the 25% voting rights, and he will have new compensation packages.
So I feel like I remember several years ago, there was a proposal by the board. I think, was it maybe to change the length of tenure of the board members, that we kind of ran into the same issue where we weren't able, even though the majority of votes that were cast were in favor of the board's proposal, it wasn't able to pass because we didn't have a sufficient number of shares voted in the vote. Is that essentially what we're looking at being the likely culprit of this not passing if, for the redomestication to Texas?
Yeah. The point we had, I think I remember, it was they wanted to go down from their current 3-year rhythm of revoting to a 1-year rhythm. I don't remember, but it was one of those basic questions that are that are addressing the bylaws, the big lines of the bylaws that Tesla has written 2006 or 2005, whenever it was. So when you want to change those big things, you need a higher quorum of participants in the vote. And if you don't reach that quorum, then the whole vote doesn't matter because it's not eligible to be taken into account. So yes, that is what we're running against with the Texas vote. I mean, the Texas vote, the quorum is now defined by this TripAdvisor case, but the same thing could happen. My most likely scenario for the June the 30th, is any of you two going to the shareholder meeting? No,
not me.
None of you. Well, I'll be there. I'll represent you. So I'll sit there. So I think that Martin, who always announces the outcome, will say we didn't have the quorum for the Texas redomestication. So that will mean we'll just, represent that at another time, and we'll have the results for Kimball and James Murdoch and the compensation package and all that. And I'm very confident in all the other items. Because for those, the quorum is the group is just the casted votes. There you don't have this issue of outstanding shares.
So there's a real possibility that if, there were some institutional shareholders that voted no, that could actually help us if it got us past the quorum necessary to have a sufficient number of votes, as long as the majority still voted yes.
Well, exactly. I mean, the Texas vote is a very precise thing because it's the only item in the whole list of the 12 questions where non-participating entities in the vote are counted as no. So whether an institutional votes no or just doesn't vote, it's the same no. Whether somebody in Germany can't vote, it's the same no. It's a non-vote, but it counts as a no. But that's only true for the Texas redomestication.
So the net percentage of the float has to vote yes over 50%.
Exactly. So we have 3.189 billion shares outstanding. So just short of 1.6 billion shares have to vote yes to Texas redomestication. That is it. And you may not even have 1.6 billion shares participating, and they all have to be yes. That's why we're fighting for every vote. And the 400 and something shares that Elon and Kimball have can participate in this 1.6 billion. So we're about 1.17, I think I calculated it, that have to vote yes, that we have to find.
What are you hearing from the retail investors? I'm sure you're hearing a lot. I mean, one of the things that I love about Alexandra is she's really the boomer mama. She really is the mama. Like everybody goes to mama with all their things and concerns and everything. What are you hearing? What's the vibe? And I'm also curious to see, are you hearing anything from institutionals as well? Like what's the overall vibe on this thing?
From institutions, we don't hear a lot. We obviously heard CalPERS's spokesperson. I mean, I think she's the CEO of CalPERS, who was on CNBC and who said they intend to vote no, but they're still waiting for a meeting with Tesla. So I hope that Robin Denholm or whoever is in charge of them, because I mean, this is a team effort. They are all working. The board members are jetting around the world and trying to convince people. So I haven't given up on that yet. And I think, they're not in an easy position. I mean, there is no other techno king CEO as outspoken and controversial as Elon, and they now suddenly have to defend that and have to make sure that people understand this is about Tesla shares and not about Elon's persona. So they have a tough job. So I don't know anything about institutions, and please do know this is only partially true for international investors, but US and Canadians who are voting on proxy vote, they can change their vote up till midnight on June the 12th. So there could still be some movement. So it's not because we know somebody voted for or against that this is the final casted vote, because there's still possibility to change it. And that's actually another thing, good thing that reminds me of is some people inadvertently publish their control numbers. The control number is what lets you vote on proxy vote. Anybody that then knows that control number can actually alter your vote. So I urge everybody who had made that mistake of publishing their control numbers to go back on the 12th of June and check that their original votes are still casted the way they wanted them. But to say all that, there is no prognostics. I mean, Broadridge on their corporate website says they're keeping their companies updated. So Tesla must know what is currently in the ballots. But obviously, a Vanguard with 7% is going to be a game changer. Elon followed the CFO of BlackRock. That gives me a lot of peace and love, right? That gives me a good feeling. Obviously, but ARK only has 5 million shares left. They had 20 million at one point. Ron Barron is on CNBC tomorrow morning. So I think there is a lot of institutional support. Now, also do know that in 2018, when the original vote was casted, it was 70% institutionals and 30% retail. Let me recall, now we're down to 52.5 to 47.5. So institutions have decreased, and we retail have increased a lot by more than 50%. Then it passed with 73%. Albeit you heard a lot of institutions say before, we're never going to vote for it, never going to do it. You had Glass Lewis, you had ISS, everybody saying, don't vote for it, don't vote for it. And yet it passed with 70%. So I think money managers are profoundly capitalistic. And I also know that quite a lot of them are in Delaware and are domesticated in Delaware. They're sitting in Chicago or in New York or wherever, in Boston, but they have their LLCs or their corps in Delaware, and they must not like what's happening at the moment. I mean, this is a blow to anybody that has, a good sense of capitalism in their veins. So I still think we will have the majority of institutions. There will be some players. Nordea is one of the Nordic that has already signed with the Good Sisters of I don't know what, that they're going to vote against. The New York controller is against it. So and obviously CalPERS. So you have some political motivated entities, ESG motivated entities that will vote against. But I'm still quite confident. On the retail side, we know that Leo Kogan said he's going to vote no, and he has rallied a couple of people around him. But that is less than 1%, right? CalPERS is less than 1/3%. So if you think about it, we are the strongest force in here, us retail investors. We just need to be organized. And again, I mean, we did what we could for this vote in a very, very short span of time, in a couple of weeks. If this doesn't pass, we will have more time to assemble and structure this better and make sure this works. I mean, the pressure is now on the banks and on all these proxy vote organizers.
Yeah, I think the thing that's been toughest for me to get my head wrapped around, and again, one of the things about media and social media is like, the minorities always have outsized megaphone influence, because that's what social media is designed to do, is to bring the most controversial takes forward. And so, but one of the things that I can't get my head wrapped around is how folks that have voted yes in the past vote no now. Like if you voted no before and you vote no now, great. I mean, at least like you are consistent. But if you voted yes before and you vote no now, anyway, I don't want to go on a rant because I go on a rant for the last 10 minutes of this podcast.
I want to go in that rant because usually it is butthurt people, and I want to say that. And I know I'll get a lot of hate for saying it, but it is.
I agree with you.
It is really people that have other issues with Elon and that feel like a revenge moment they finally have been waiting for, and now their power is to vote no. They're actually hurting themselves. Remember, only people that held stock on the 15th of April can vote. So if these people still hold stock, well, they're actually hurting themselves. The other thing is only people that held stock on the 15th of April in the proportion of their holdings. Some people understand that, everybody has one vote. No. Leo Kogan has a bigger vote than my vote. Of course, it is proportional to the shares you have. So some of the outspoken people out there, first of all, may not have stock or may have very little stock, but still, use the megaphone they have on social media. So honestly, of the bigger ones I know of, because the surveys have helped me to know them, they're there. They're standing like a man. I am surprised at how this retail army of people are determined to make Elon stay, make him feel good, want to show their support. I'm really surprised by that. And of course, there's some outspoken people. I mean, the funny example this morning was when we organized I think it was in end of February, beginning of March, to write letters to the Chancery Court in Delaware to the judge saying we're really unhappy with her initial ruling. I started that off, but Amy helped a lot. It was really great. Thousands of people wrote letters from worldwide. Why, gosh, what didn't I hear? That's going to go right in the shredder. She'll throw it in the bin. No. It became public record today. All of them had to be included in the case, right?
That's awesome.
So those naysayers then, well, whatever, right? There will always be naysayers.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's been just so. Yeah, it's been a little bit of a confusing time because a lot of the things you hear in the media are related to, like you said, that less than 1% of the influence on the vote. They come on CNBC or whatever and they talk about how they're going to vote no, so on and so forth. But it feels like there is a silent majority of people that are pro-capitalism, that do understand that, potentially the way, like I'll just speak about my own sort of where I come from on this, the mistakes, quote unquote, let's call them mistakes that were made in the comp package in 2018 to me seem administrative and clerical more than anything. They're
Correct.
Not actually fundamental to the plan itself. It's based on numbers. Nobody was misled. And so when I read that or hear that from people that especially that voted yes before and voted no now, to me it feels like it's much more politically motivated, or it's irrational or emotionally driven because of words that were said on social media by the CEO and less about the actions and the execution of the company. And that makes my blood boil, to be completely honest. But it's probably the very few minority.
Completely agreed.
It's definitely empowering the nanny state, and it is infuriating for people who want to have their own voice and their own empowerment and not to be overridden by some coastal elite in Delaware who not only doesn't care about you, but specifically tries to exercise her unelected power to go against your wishes in what you would like to be done with what you own personally.
Yeah, it is true. And I mean, one thing I want to say is we haven't stopped fighting back. There is still going to be stuff happening in the next couple of days and weeks in that Delaware court case. And there's obviously still 10 days or 9 days now for us to make an impact on that vote. So I just want to make sure that everybody that has not voted yet does vote. there are now ways for those that thought a couple of weeks ago it's not possible. It is possible. I'll remain available for anybody who needs instructions how to vote. And there will be moments we will have to become active on helping Tesla either in the appeal or when the 204 comes after the majority voted for the compensation package to make sure these pass. So this is going to be still weeks and weeks of mobilization, if not even months. This whole situation may be cleared only in a year. People have to understand this is not just one vote that will make it happen. This is legal procedures, and that always takes time. So nobody likes talking about it. Believe me, if I wouldn't have to talk about governance, I would just be as happy in my life. But it's part of being a shareholder in a public company, and especially in one that is so controversial and where so many people hate Tesla. And in those moments, you feel it. I mean, this morning, Farzad, we saw it on CNBC again. I mean, the hatred, the FUD, they throw everything at us, and it's gonna be like that until June the 13th. Then they will suddenly slow down again because they're done. It's just incredible. But more they hate us, stronger we become.
Yeah, I mean, it's par for the course of media. High interest keywords that are controversial get a lot of clicks in 2024, and the goal of media is to figure out how to bring these things together to maximize the click-through rate on that piece of media you're creating versus actually presenting the thing for what it is. Especially if you're a publication whose job self-proclaimed is to bring the truth or information forward as is in a factual manner that is complete and has all the context available, which in this day and age seems to be very, very, very rare, unfortunately.
And I have to add, we actually have suddenly two allies that I thought we'd never have. Andrew Sawkins has been stellar on this subject. Stellar. I just want to say it because I wasn't a huge fan of his. And Squawk Books is much too early for me in California, but I have to say he has been stellar. He has always put people back in place. He has asked the right questions, no matter who was there.
In my opinion, his interview of Elon was the best Elon interview ever. You
mean Jonathan? And the second is Jim Cramer. I mean, I couldn't believe it. This morning again, clearly saying we have to vote for Musk. We need Musk. We need this person there. And I think that is the underlying sentiment on Wall Street. So that gives me a lot of comfort for the institutionals. Now, again, I'm not saying we've won yet. We have not. I say it again. I would be highly surprised if Texas passes. So don't, manage your expectations for Texas. If Texas passes, I mean, that's party time, no doubt. But one after the other, it will come.
So after all these votes are casted, if option A comes to fruition, which is hopefully yes and yes, comp package yes, Texas yes, or comp package yes, Texas no, whatever that is. What other things should a Tesla investor expect at this shareholder meet?
So the shareholder meeting, on the other questions, I think is not going to be of full surprises. It's going to be quite a boring part. I don't think the re-election of Kimball and James Murdoch is really in question. I would be very surprised if that is an issue. Price Waterhouse as the auditor, I don't see an issue on that one. That's actually the only ones where brokers can vote. That's also something people don't understand. Brokers, when they have your landed shares, they can't just vote on everything. They can only vote on certain of the items. And the one they can vote on is the Price Waterhouse one, which why maybe I have to ask the SEC one day. So anyway, and then the last 6 or 7 questions are these shareholder proposals on cobalt mining and the same stuff we see every year. So I mean they have to be dealt with, and it's going to be a boring part, whatever. If we get Plan A, both the comp package and Texas, I think this will be a big sigh of relief. I think the shareholder meeting is really gonna transpire what a battle this was. I mean, Robin Denholm going a couple of times on the Financial Times. She has, I've followed this woman now backwards about 10 years. She was once on CNBC for a very short interview with Ron Barron, and that was it. She is not publicly active. And she has taken this task on. So the big relief will be there. But then I really hopefully think we're getting back to business. There's so much more to talk about, bots and cars and robotaxi and whatever else. If we can just move on and away from this governance issues to business again, that would just be the brightest coming out of that. The share price, in my view, will go up. I think there is about a $20, $30, $40 overhang on this vote. It can still go down if it's negative. So there may be some volatility in the stock price as well.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we all publicly thank you. You know, so much of what you're doing, you understand just based on your professional experience how some of these things work in the background at a much higher level than most of us normal retail shareholders, especially me. And so it's been fun not only to see you help mobilize the retail shareholder base so that we have more of a voice, but also to get a deeper understanding of how these things actually work, the logistics, the mechanics. And so I just want to huge shout out, huge round of applause for the incredible work that you have been doing on our behalf as retail shareholders, and also your ability, willingness to explain all of this and to help us get a little bit smarter and to understand it at a higher level.
Thank you very
so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I'm doing it with pleasure because it's really for the good cause of Tesla. But I wish it's over soon, honestly, for all of us.
9 days. At Tesla Boomer Mama on X. Any parting words?
Well, vote. If you haven't voted yet, if you don't know how to vote, reach out. We'll help you. We'll make sure you get voted.